Hello and welcome to basically what was supposed to be this next TV restoration. What I decided to do to mark the 40th anniversary of the end of the 405 line television service, or what I'd intended to do, was to restore this pretty ordinary mid-50s Echo T221, Echo's first TV with a Band 3 tuner. However, it was not to be, because the scan coils are shorted, line scan coils, and even though I have got a spare T221, at the time that I discovered that those were shorted, there just wasn't enough time for me to go to my storage unit, dig it out, bring it here, get the scan coils out of that, and put them in this set. So, and then continue on with the rest of the restoration, because there's loads of other stuff that needed doing on it. So, a little bit of a change of plan. Instead, in a true Blue Peter moment, here's one I did earlier. This is a 1968 or 69 or 70 Ferguson Junior 16 using Thorn's 981 chassis. It's the 16-inch version of the 980, which was a 12-inch set. Completely different cabinet. You might just think that it was the same look cabinet but just scaled down a bit. No, the cabinet was completely different. This and all the examples, these come up from time to time, whether they be in Ferguson or Ultra, or I think I've even got a very rare one that's badged as DER somewhere, which was another of Thorn's rental names. But they come up from time to time, and they always, without fail, have a cracked front bezel. Without fail. No, you can count on it, you know. You can count on the fact that if you get one of these, it will have a cracked bezel. So yeah, I did this one a few years ago. So let me just get all this dust out of the way from the Echo. Disgusting. So I got one of I did this one a few years ago. I mean, I've already got another one in black. I've also got one with ruby red leather around it, and then I've also got another one of these down there that had a jittery frame transformer, which I'm now just using for scrap. So yeah, I've fully electronically restored this one a few years ago, and it worked as my everyday set for a good while. Now, these were the last ever single standard 405 line televisions made ever. For a good few years, by the late 60s, a good few years before then, so going back to the early 60s, televisions were pretty much exclusively dual standard 625 405 with mechanical switching, either that being a bar along the bottom of the set with plates on for connecting to different components that are 405 or 625 only, or I think some later dual standard sets from the late 60s had solenoids. But so by that point, you know, they probably would have thought that single standard 405 line sets, they were a thing of the past. But no. What Thorn did, remember Thorn owned several different rental companies and also several different brands used on televisions. Rental companies I think they owned were, at that point in the late 60s, I think DER had just come under their spell. Radio rentals had been for a long time. Rumbelows I know was owned by Thorn. I don't know if it was at that time, but Rumbelows I think were retail only. I don't think they did rental. God, what was the other one? It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember. There was Radio Rentals, DER, I think a few others. I can't remember. But anyway. So, yeah, so by the late 60s, Thorn had surprised, well, not surprised, but probably slightly raised an eyebrow in the British TV manufacturing field. There's a massive hole there. You know, that's a 1980s era Doctor Who plot hole. Right, sized hole. Right, ooh. Anyway, so yes, Thorn must have raised a few eyebrows very slightly in the late 60s when they made this and the 980, which were single standard 405 line televisions. Reason why, as far as I can ascertain, as far as I can remember as well, was that these only really existed as an incentive for people to rent with Thorn. Like, hey, you rent this big 24-inch black and white set, and you get a second set discounted, or something like that. I remember reading once, vague memories of reading on VRAT forums somewhere, that that these, I think either these or the 980, the 12-inch version of this chassis, were given out free rentals, not as free to own, but as free rentals if you took up rental on a Thorn 2000 chassis set, which of course, as many in the trade would have remembered, and also many hobbyists like myself would probably know, was Thorn's first colour set to be made for a domestic market. It was Thorn's first colour set to be made for a domestic market. The 2000 was, and so yeah, basically these just existed as an incentive, and the reason why that factored into why these were single standard only is because Thorn wanted to avoid as much as possible making a loss on such an incentive. Now, barely anyone at that time watched BBC Two. It was pretty much the TV equivalent of Radio 3, and it had a few sitcoms and that sort of thing, but it was mainly very artsy night out at the theatre kind of stuff, which didn't appeal to most people. Right, and also it was only on UHF, on the 625 line time base, of course, which was not available everywhere, and they knew at the end of the 60s when this was made, and when that colour was just around the corner, and they knew that colour coverage would be signal coverage, geographical coverage would take some years to match that of 405 lines, which was pretty much complete by 1968-69. There were one or two like spots that were to be filled in over 1969 and 1970, but it was pretty much complete. So basically these could just be used anywhere within the UK anyway. Right, so chassis, sorry, not chassis, what am I about? The knob numbers have slightly worn off, so I'm thinking that this, if I remember rightly, I think I got this set from, I think I got it from Huddersfield or somewhere very close to Huddersfield. In fact, another one of these sets, I think the one with the red, ruby red leather, also came from very close to Huddersfield, Wakefield, that sort of thing, that sort of place. So it would have been BBC One, would have been on VHF Channel 2 from Holm Moss. ITV, Yorkshire Television, of course, would have been on Channel 10 from Emley Moor, and that is basically that switching action that you've just seen me do. That is really the reason. You can't see it very well because these numbers have rubbed off, but that is the reason why on, I would say, the majority of 405 line capable sets, VHF capable sets, whether they be single standard or dual standard, with switchable tuners, that's the reason why these channel numbering allocations are a bit odd, because in most parts of the country the frequencies, the channels were on they were on channels that were allocated pretty much in this order. I mean, for instance, 5 and 11 I think that there were two areas of the country that used 5 and 11 actually. East of England, BBC on Channel 5 from Tackleston, ITV, Anglia on Channel 11 from Mendlesham, and also in the south, I think, Hampshire, Dorset, East Sussex sort of way, with BBC from Rowridge on Channel 5 and ITV Southern Television, and then later on, of course, TVS on Channel 11 from Chillerton down. So, I mean, there were some parts of the country that didn't have these channel allocations next to each other, so some people might say have had to switch from, I don't know, Channel 5 BBC, whatever that was, to Channel 13 ITV. And I think that even in a couple of parts of the country, I think from Belmont near Louth in Lincolnshire and Winter Hill near Bolton in Lancashire, they even had BBC channels, BBC One on Band 3 to provide, I think in Winter Hill's case, to provide for regional BBC One, when BBC One Northwest was split from BBC One, when the BBC North region was split down the middle to reflect what ITV were doing in the late 60s, and have the Northwest as one region and Yorkshire as the other. And I think in Belmont's case, because Belmont opened on ITV and BBC One quite late in 1965, that just used Channel 13 because it was the only, I could well be wrong, but I think that was just the only VHF channel available that the BBC could use in that part of the country. Right, so anyway, enough of my waffling. It's called Ferguson Junior 16 inch, of course. That's not the actual model number. Model number here is 3649. I think 3 was Thorn's stock code or something like that for Ferguson models. I can't remember what the other numbers were, but basically what the model number started with denoted what brand it would be on. So 3 was Ferguson, and then something else would have been Ultra, something else would have been DER, something else would have been Marconi, something else would have been HMV, and so on and so on. And then something else would have been Baird. Anyway, so I just want to plug this in because it's been a few years since I last used it, and I say I fully electronically restored it. What I meant was that I'd replaced any faulty valves, replaced any capacitors that were known to be unreliable, even if they were good at that particular point in time, and also replaced any faulty capacitors that are otherwise have a good reputation, and also replaced any out of tolerance resistors and cleaned it up a bit inside and that sort of thing. That doesn't mean that something else that I hadn't replaced, because whatever it is might not usually go wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't go wrong now. So that's why I'm still giving myself a little bit of time, only just a little bit of time to get any repairs on this done before, so it's ready in time for the big day. We're on Boxing Day night at the moment. I know I said earlier that I don't really have much time to get the scan coils out of that, but it's because I'm working both tomorrow and the 28th and the 29th, and then again on the 2nd and the 3rd, which only leaves me probably about 5 days worth, if I'm also including the 5 or 6 days worth, if I'm including the time, the spare time that I'd have on the days when I'm working. So because that thing still had a lot of work that needed doing on it, even if the scan coils, well, I mean, if the scan coils had worked, then I would have carried on doing it. There would have been just enough time, but now the scan coils have gone. There just isn't enough time for me to go and get a spare set of coils from my other T221 in storage, hope that they would work. If they did, then get the rest of the set done, and if they didn't, then faff about getting them out of a T283, which I also have, which is mostly similar to T221. But anyway, so I don't know if anything else is going, if any kinds of faults have developed while this set has been in storage in the house. It's a bit dusty though. That's not representative of the cleanliness of my house, right, but yeah. So I'm going to see what it does. I am going to still do it the safe way. There's no harm in doing it the safe way. Lamp limiter plugged into an isolation transformer via an extension socket. So yeah, let's get this fired. Let's get this fired up. You recording? Yep, you're recording. You're also recording my fat belly. I am actually losing weight, right? In my own somewhat slow way, right? Since July, I've lost about £10, and I don't mean money. Right, so plug in. That's right. Ooh. That wasn't a good start, was it? Let's move that back, and pick that up. Right. I'm also tripping over things as well. Right, so I've not got anything plugged in on the signal yet. Let me switch on the plug, that would be a good idea. And put it on the lamp limiter first. And switch on there, okay. Lamp limiter started off bright and then it's slowly dimming, so that means that we have continuity, that there's current passing through the valves. Like most British televisions, the valves are in series. So if you're not a techie, think of it like Christmas lights that are wired in series, where if one goes, then you have to go through the whole lot to find out which bulb has gone. Pretty much similar principle. You probably won't be enough current to see any actually glowing dimly yet, but that's definitely got dimmer. It looks brighter in the camera, and I don't really think you can see much difference in the camera, but that's definitely dimmer. No. Shall we just go for it? Go for it, switch it on to full mains. We have sound. Oh, 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 oh. Okay. Okay. So, yep. It works. Tuner works as well. Okay, good. Good. Let me just plug a signal source into it. The flickering that you're seeing that's going up like that, I don't see that in real life. That's just the picture being produced on the TV being taken, the picture being produced on the TV actually being drawn out by the electron beam at a different interval that the chip inside the camera is taking the image, so they're not quite matching up. I think I have my Aurora converter around here. I've also got a Hedgehog 405 converter as well, that I think is also down here actually. I think I remember bringing it down for that echo. Trouble is that they're both fairly small and it's fairly easy to lose them. Let me just switch that off just for a moment because it's wasting electricity. Bloody messy. I will have to dig around a little bit, so I'll save recording time. Aurora, which has recently gone out of production because the chips are no longer available. Mine's a bit damaged, it's got cracks there. And the Hedgehog, which is still in production as of about now, right? Christmas, New Year, Christmas 2024, New Year 2025. The Aurora is very, 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 very good, but the Hedgehog is just slightly better because it has a few more features built into it. So I'm going to put the Aurora back, and I am looking for a power supply, and I can borrow it from this UHF modulator. We're obviously not going to need that. God, honestly, see, this is the reason why I suspect I've got ADHD and why I'm still waiting for a diagnosis. Right, needs between 7.5 and 9 volt DC, regulated 300 milliamp current, and centre pin is the plus. This is output 12 volt, 250 milliamp, that might actually be enough, and centre pin is plus. Okay, right, and then after that all we need is an aerial cable. I don't need my multimeter, so I hope I don't need it, so I can unplug that. That in. I can also save power by switching my scope off because I don't need that. I used the scope to do a ring test on the scan coils in the Echo, which condemned it. Yep, 250 milliamps is enough. Power supply is probably working a little bit harder than it should do, but it should be okay. And then cable, aerial cable, F connector, Belling-Lee connector, F connector to Belling-Lee adapter. And then we just need the cable itself, which I've got loads of examples of. Loads of them. This is probably going to just take me a split second to do. Centre pin bent? No. No. And then cables. He says he has loads of them. There's one there. I can borrow it from the UHF modulator. This and this are not just standards converters, they're also VHF RF modulators as well, and they do convert to the full 405 line standard. In fact, do I need one with male-male connector rather than male-female? Yes, I do. That one's useless. Male. I know I've got some around here somewhere. I know I have. I was using them for the Decker and the other one, that 14-inch Thorn. What was at the other end of this? Oh, is that? Oh, that is the literal aerial cable. That one, other end of that, is non-detachable and it goes into my workshop aerial. Workshop set-top aerial. You might have to give me just a split second, guys. Says he had plenty of aerial cables and could only find one, or one that's any use. Speaker can go there. I've got loads of cables of some description in this bottom drawer. Hang on, is this one? Nope, that one's male to female as well. And I know to get loads upstairs of both types. Might have to go and dig around for those. Yeah. I did. I did. Male. It's here in amongst all the other shit. Cheap one, so it might be a little bit flaky, but it should work okay. On. What settings do I want? Yeah, let's have it on test card with a tone, 1 kHz. For some perverse reason I've never quite understand, I like it on soft aperture, which is 2-line interpolation, which is, I think, pretty much what the ITV 405 line converters did, from what they used from 69 to 85. BBC used 4-line interpolation, which is not available on here. This uses 2-line interpolation, 3 lines, so it looks like what the Aurora did, and I think 6-line. Equalising pulses now. Pedestal, can't remember what that does, I'll find out in a minute. Input 4x3. Yeah, just in case you're displaying something from YouTube or anything that's in 16:9, squashed 16:9, I think it, 16:9 image squashed into 4x3. I think this allows you to display it in letterbox, so it, or expand it or something, I can't quite remember. And output 4x3 or 5x4, yeah, early 405 line television, up to 1936 up to 1950 was in a 5x4 aspect ratio, and then in 1950, can't remember when during that year, but it was during 1950 they converted it to 4x3. Or you could just have modulator only in case you wanted to use your own, an older type of 405 line converter, like a Domino or a Dinosaur, or I think there was another one as well that I can't remember. But anyway, let's see, it's on channel 5 at the moment. No. Channel 11 we're getting something there, we're getting a sideband of something, so this is probably on channel 10. It's fine tuning. It's not. Is it on channel 9? Channel 9, so I have to guess which one is channel 9. There we are. Pretty much. Where's the horizontal hold control? Forgotten. There we are. There we are. That looks pretty good. There is a slight width problem, I think. Don't think it was that wide, and also there's linearity doesn't look quite right. It looks a bit oval shaped. So the width might need just a touch up, because that's working a little bit hard. Yeah, it's probably about 95% there. Just in the fine tuning, that's about right. either of a BBC One tone, or I think that's an ITV tone, an IBA tone. You can have it off and just have program sound. That does look a little wide, unless I think I may well have set that deliberately. Actually, I think actually the last time I used this was on the Aurora, and what I found when setting a setup on the Aurora is that and loads of other engineers may chuck stuff at me for saying this, that oh, they both meet 4 or 5 line standards. Well, they may well do, but the image that's put out by a Hedgehog and the image that's put out by Aurora are very slightly different dimensions, I found. So I found that switching between the two, that actually, because I'm a little bit I like the settings to be a particular way, in that we don't have any black bars along the bottom or down the sides, any at all. I found that they do actually need a little bit of adjustment. It's probably just me, probably because I'm just used to, because I was only born in the I'm only in my mid-30s, so I'm used to televisions. I grew up with televisions from the solid state era, which were a bit more stable. Right, not valve sets like this, right, where it needs adjustment fairly regularly. Aperture control, which is the soft, medium and sharp. Remember the 2-line, 3-line, 6-line thing that has no effect on the test card. Okay. So shall we get some program on it? I think we should. I think, does this have? Yeah, it's got RCA connectors on the back, yellow, red and white, so I can just plug the PVR straight into it, switch the test pattern off, why we have nothing, why do we have nothing? Where do we have nothing? Because I have got the SCART at this end unplugged, that's why. Yeah, weak signal because I've not got the aerial plugged into it. Don't really need that plugged into it because TV is displaying a picture from it. It doesn't care whether there's a digital signal or not, because when this thing was made, I imagine that digital was in the realms of science fiction for most people. Yeah, that aerial, I think either the aerial cable or aerial socket are a little bit dicky. And the contrast is a bit strong, so the signal's probably going to be a bit strong. Hang on, I have an attenuator here somewhere. Forgot about that. There we are. Right, so yeah, it probably doesn't look any different to you, but okay, this set, like most most slightly more modern sets, analog sets, has fuzzier screen when you turn down the signal level. From what I remember, most 405 sets just reduce the contrast and brightness without showing any noise, any snow on the picture really. And that attenuator is a little bit hokey. That's starting to fall to pieces, so might have to get another one of those. Try and suppress a burp. Right. So that is working pretty much fine, I would say. Let me just switch it back onto test card. That's a little bit wide still. Where's the remote control for that? Right there in front of me, and I couldn't bloody see the thing. Anyway, let's reposition that so it can get a signal. Right. Menu. Yeah, that is slightly wide, isn't it? That picture. That needs touching up a little. This is from Transdiffusion, I think. Yeah, ooh, that is very wide. Right. If I remember rightly, the width is actually a control on the back, but you have to use a screwdriver or something to get at it. And of course, you know, I've got loads of screwdrivers somewhere. Don't worry, I'm plugged into the isolation transformer, and I can't remember which one of these holes does the width. Right, so switch off. I know somewhere that I've got a service manual for this. Somewhere. And I know I have because I used it, and I remember using it when I restored this set. Not that one, that one's for a set for a few years later. Where are you? I know I've got you somewhere. I know I've got it. Just having a look on here as well. Hitachi, Decca. I know I've got you somewhere. Where the hell are you? Marconi VT161. Did I use one of the Nunes books? I know that I've got the Nunes book with this model in. I just don't know if I used that or not. Did I or didn't I use it? Thorn 9000 series. Don't want that. I have got a 9000 in my collection, so I'll need that at some point, but not right now. Thorn 8000. Have I put it somewhere? Have I just lazily just slipped it in here? No, I've not. I've also got an 8000 somewhere. I think I must have restored this using one of the Nunes books actually. I remember using the I remember looking at the circuit and things. Yeah, I think I've used one of the Nunes books. So I don't think I have the service manual for it, it would have come in something like this, right, something only with a white with only a few pages, because that was late 60s, early 70s. This was kind of Thorn's format for the service manuals. Gromit. Where the fuck is it, Gromit? 68, 69. 68, 69. Colour TV. We don't want that, do we? BRC, which was Thorn's other name, as I think I covered in the video where I repaired that model. Right, BRC, page 508, 508, 508, 508. 970 series chassis. I've not heard of a 970. Dual standard television chassis, similar in some respects to the Mark II version of the 950, which was an excellent dual standard television, and that's not sarcasm. It genuinely was. So it's not that though, because this isn't even dual standard. This thing. 1400, no, again that's a dual standard. 625 and 405 line. Well, earth is it? I know I've got it somewhere. I know I've got it. 3649, okay. 3649. These two 16-inch models employ chassis assembly which is similar to the Thorn 980 series chassis, except that the contrast, brilliance and brightness, volume and on and off controls are separately mounted in the cabinet. The Thorn 980 series chassis is described on page 502 in the 1967-68 volume, okay. But I don't need to dig that out because it tells me what I need to know. There. See, width, that one, which is that one there, I think, that one there. So let me just swing the viewfinder back round. Yeah, got to be. Vertical, horizontal hold, height, frame linearity, which I might also need to adjust as well, width. So let me just zoom you in. I've just realised you are zoomed out. Yep. So yeah, here we are. Vertical hold, horizontal hold, height, frame linearity, which I might also need to adjust, and width. Right, definitely need to adjust width, and here is where I wish I had a mirror, but I don't, because with my ugly mug I might break it. Right, I don't want the hook end, do I? I want that end. And I need to spend just a second or so here, guys. Adjusting that, it might actually be easier if I just took the back off. It'll be easier. Okay, it'll be easier if I took the back off, and then also you lot can see inside. So just give me just one moment to get this off. Sorry, I don't know how much of that you lost. I've only just noticed that this wasn't recording. This is the Thorn 980 chassis, Thorn 981 chassis. Only a couple of differences in it to make it drive only a couple of differences in it from a 980, so that it could drive a 16-inch tube. So power supply, as noted by the mains fuse, the big fuck off sized capacitor, and also the rectifier diode, which on this set is metal type, I think, and also the high wattage resistors, tuner, obviously. IF stages are around here because I know that because there's trimming coils here. I think also that the sound stage is around here as well, and what makes me come to that conclusion is that is the speaker, so that is obviously the sound output transformer, and then the wires coming from that go here, here, up there, around there, down there, and then each wire as it's grouped together there, but then they're all spread out and go to their own posts there. So I imagine that the sound stage is also around there. I can't remember which one of these two is the which one is the frame oscillator and which one is the sync separator, but one of them is the frame oscillator and one of them the sync separator. Frame output, obviously, right, and you can see it's got a metal clip around it. I say obviously because that one is a bit taller, so that one's that one's got to put out a lot of power rather. Line oscillator, line output, boost diode, and then there's no valved EHT rectifier. It's by the late 60s they were all using solid state rectifier sticks, really. In fact, I think that in the early 70s Rank used RBM, Rank Bush Murphy. They used a set with a valve DHT rectifier, I think, black and white one. But yep, and isn't this just easily the easiest tripler unit or voltage double unit? Look, there's no potting in epoxy resin, none of that rubbish. Look, just two things that just hinge open, and there you are. Then you can pull out the silicon rectifier sticks. I think they are silicon, but you can pull those out. And Thorn came up with that design, and I don't know why they didn't continue to use it. Or why other manufacturers adopted the idea. Surely that would just be a bit easier on the company, especially if they were especially if one company owned a manufacturer and also owned its own rental chains and also employed its own service engineers. Surely that would be a bit more efficient. In case the tripler went, just open it up, change the sticks, job done, rather than having to unsolder the tripler or whatever. Yeah, in fact I remember that some triplers you could just pretty much slip on and slip off, you know, they were plug-in designs actually. Now come to think of it, some of them were. And then of course last thermionic gadget in here, the tube, which is a Mazda CME 1602 or A40/12W. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I would imagine that these, and also the 12-inch version, probably even more so the 12-inch version, were fairly unreliable. Why do I think that? Well, reason why is because we've got a lot of heat generating components in here, and it's cramped into that. There's not much space for convection there. But I suppose in Thorn's defence, you know, they would have assumed that this would only be used as a second set, so maybe used for a few hours a week or something, not used as a main set, so wouldn't generate as much heat, therefore less opportunity for component breakdown. But yeah, they weren't limited to valves in the late 60s. Even in the early 60s, Pi and I think another company were making black and white, portable black and white sets, not big screen, but portable black and white sets that were all solid state and used the transistors of the day. In the early 60s, we're still fairly early into transistor development. So by the late 60s, when this was made, Thorn could well have used the transistors that were available then, which would have been a step up from what was available to Pi and others in the early 60s, for those who had made solid state sets. But if they had done that, then the development costs would have eaten into the returns that Thorn wanted from this set, really. Because remember, as I said, this set was an incentive. It was meant to be cheap. It was designed to be cheap. So they would have just used fairly common circuits that they already had, that they already knew and had already designed for other sets, and probably just borrowed bits of the circuit designs from other sets, and then came up with this, which just made it cheaper. I assume that that's what they did anyway. It does seem to be a fairly conservative design. However, one thing that isn't conservative is my use of wires from a few years ago. That needs trimming back, as does that replacement aerial cable. So yeah, and I covered the sound output transformer. That is obviously the line output transformer. Extremely, and I mean extremely reliable Thorn jelly pot. Extremely reliable design, even to this day. And that, I assume, then is going to be the frame output transformer, because the frame output valve is right there. Anyway, that is the width pot, and that is what I need to adjust. Now, it's not going to be as dangerous as if I wasn't using an isolation transformer. It's not going to be as dangerous as if I wasn't using that. But I'm going to need to adjust this while I've still got the set on. And I'm probably going to have to be a little bit careful, because the HT and the focus are right by it. So I'm probably, yeah, and even with even with the set on an isolation transformer, the voltages around there is still going to be pretty hairy, so I want to avoid getting nipped as much as possible, really. Oh, I've even got a cobweb in there. Go on, Mr. Spider's house, go on, bugger off. Go on, go away. Yeah, so there it is, the Thorn 980. This is the set that I'm going to be using for playing some old 405 line material on to mark the 40th anniversary of the end of the service. Just adjusting a few things, and I've managed to sort of, I suppose, get the shape of the circle right. When I look at it on the viewfinder, it does look a little bit out of shape, just a tiny bit egg-shaped, but that is sort of right. I've had to reduce the width a bit. Now we've got this down here, so if it's a bit hairy, if I just expand the width a little bit like that. And that doesn't look too bad, does it? That's not bad at all. Oh god, the dust from this set is starting to get to my throat. Right, because it's getting warm and the dust is burning off. Right, I want it on that sharp aperture. You'll be able to see that very well up close. Be able to see what that does. See, quite soft, sharper, sharpest. See if we can get it even closer. See? And these even on the ITA. So we want it on the sharpest, because then that is what a 405 line image looks like. 405 line example of the test card, not the test card, the Picasso tuning signal. Only used by the ITA, as far as I believe. The ITA were the government regulator for ITV. And they, in 71 or 72, they became the regulator for commercial radio when that was launched, and they became the IBA, the Independent Broadcasting Authority. So yeah, they are one of many predecessors to Ofcom. Right, so before Ofcom was formed in 2005, I think it was. Basically, the telecoms regulators were all split and divided into all sorts of different bodies. Ofcom just grouped them all together into one. Right, so channel is that on? I believe that is 10 to 9 1. I believe that's VHF channel 1. Is it? Now, let me just have a look at the frequency thing on here. Yeah, VHF channel 1. VHF channel 1. Let's get it onto channel 10. That would be more accurate for Yorkshire TV, wouldn't it? There we are. There we are. VHF channel 10, Yorkshire Television, Emily Moore.
Television, broadcasting on the Emily Moore, Scarborough and Sheffield transmitters of the Independent Television Authority.
Yeah, for reasons that I can't quite fully remember, but I think because of the lack of, whenever there's black on the screen, it also increases, it tries to increase the signal gain or something, and then also that increases the volume slightly. As you would have seen when watching that, when it changed from the Picasso tuning signal to the Yorkshire Television sort of opening book, you know, kaleidoscope sort of logo, whatever. What is going on with this? I think that aerial socket is slightly dodgy. Probably just a couple of valves waking up after not being used for however many years. Probably a good 7 or 8 years. I think the last time I used this, you know, was before COVID. A few years before COVID. So yeah, that's not the only material that I wanted to show on it. I just decided to do my traditional thing of showing an ITV startup on it. This one, as I said, you know, got from West Yorkshire area, right, so that would have been Yorkshire Television. So I still need to, I know which clips I want to use for the tribute to 405. I've already downloaded them, but some of them are in a file format that's not compatible with this PVR here, and I need to convert them and then put them on the hard drive that's attached to that. So that will be another couple of days or so, but at least I know there's no actual faults with this, which gives me confidence in my repair ability for once. Yeah, so for tonight, off. Are we going to get the spot? No, we're not. The beam limiter circuit is working.
I remember every one of you! I'll be Doctor Who! I'll be Doctor! Grant and Ingrid Bergman star in our all-time great movie on Friday night,
at 5 to 12. It's a sophisticated comedy about a wealthy American diplomat and a beautiful actress who embark on a somewhat precarious romance, all of which is somewhat indiscreet. Well, now before the weather, it's no indiscretion to reveal what's on BBC One tomorrow evening. At 5 to 7, we have a live edition of Top of the Pops, which celebrates its 21st birthday with Tears for Fears, Toy Dolls and Wham! There's a musical accompaniment from Sheldon's guitar and steel drums at 7:35 when we're on the front line for comedy with the two Black half-brothers. Paul Daniels' Magic Moments at 8:05 conjures up highlights of illusion from his last series, including one in which a television camera disappears into thin air. And then, following the 9 o'clock news, there's deception and double dealing in the second part of the true life story surrounding the lives of that espionage partnership, Wynne and Penkovsky. Starsky and Hutch screech into action at 10:25 in the first of a two-part story in which the arrival of a top hitman starts a sequence of horrible deaths. And then, completing our evening, game, set and match at 11:15, we visit the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham for highlights of the evening's international tennis. And now for a late look at what the weather has in store, here's Ian McCaskill.
Hello there. This long band of high pressure and these cold winds do mean a frosty spell of weather for us all. It could last right over the weekend, and if anything, it'll become colder as time goes on. Over eastern Britain, too, there'll be sleet or snow showers running in from Transdiffusion as well. And in the west, not to be outdone, there'll be patches of quite persistent fog at times over the next few days there too. You can see very little change taking place on this chart on the map for noon tomorrow. They are still dominated, as you can see, by the high. There is a front, a cold front over the North Sea. There's colder air behind it, even colder air. That is likely to mean rather more in the way of showers later on tomorrow in eastern and some southern districts of Britain. But tonight, well, a very cold night everywhere. Temperatures are already dipping well below freezing in many places, especially Scotland and Northern Ireland. Well, Scotland and Northern Ireland there, where I think frostwork could well become severe. -6 is just 21 degrees Fahrenheit, -5, 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Elsewhere, quite a sharp frost, -3, 27 Fahrenheit. Still some showers, sleet, snow, hail, going along these eastern counties during the night. Most places dry. Some patches of fog, though, I think, in northwestern Britain, forming later on in the night. And then tomorrow, well, these patches of fog rather slow to clear, hanging about for a good part of the day. We think they will go, and most of us are dry with hazy sunshine at times. But again, some showers of hail, sleet or snow down those eastern counties of both Scotland and England. And later on in the day, we think some of these showers could penetrate some way inland. Eventually sleet showers getting across parts of southeast England and central southern England too. A cold day everywhere as far as we can see, 3 centigrades, just 37 Fahrenheit, where the fog hangs about. Colder than that, 1 or 2 centigrades, 34 to 36 degrees Fahrenheit. That's it. Good night.
Well, I don't suppose your television looks quite like this, but it may well bring back memories of the days when television was in its infancy. We've dusted it off to mark a very historic moment, not only for BBC One, but for television as a whole, because once we go off the air, we wave goodbye to the 405 line transmission system, which started the first public television service. Well, it's been going strong ever since 1936, but in 1964, along came the superior 625 line system, which brought improved definition, and a few years later, of course, colour. Well, it's now just about 7 minutes past midnight, and it's goodbye to 405, and it's goodbye from me, for tonight anyway. So may I, David Niles, wish you a very peaceful night on behalf of all at the Television Centre, and I hope that you can join us for more high-definition viewing tomorrow, beginning at 6:30 with breakfast time. Good night.
off the air at 9:25 this morning. The last of the old 405 line transmitters which use those aerials are being closed down. They've been replaced by the 625 system for all except a tiny number of people in isolated areas who could only receive a signal from the old transmitters. Michael Voss went to see how one Welsh family is going to cope without television.
The Williams family have never owned a colour television. When they switch on in the morning, they've no idea that Anne Diamond has hazel eyes or Nick is wearing his yellow sweater again. It's not that farmer John Williams is too mean to buy a colour set. It's just that he lives in an isolated valley some 10 miles north of Brecon, where the only signal he can pick up is from the old 405 line transmitter. The 405 line service started in 1955. It was the first real breakthrough in modern television technology, a unified system beaming programs into homes all over the country. Eventually it gave way to colour and today's modern 625 system. Yet surprisingly, most of the old 405 transmitters were kept on, though now they're running out of spare parts. And on January the 3rd, they'll all close down for good. It may be just a black and white service, but the 405 transmitters do have one advantage. They reach the valleys other signals don't reach. And for families like the Woodses, the end of 405 means no more television at all.
I don't think I can bear it, really.
You've really got to have your dose of television every evening.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, I can't do without some telly.
What was it like growing up as a kid? Were you always complaining to your dad about why he wasn't getting a colour set?
Always. Yeah. Main subject.
John Williams is used to living a little behind the times. It's a lonely life raising cattle and sheep on this 200-acre farm. But now, in 1985, if he ever wants to watch the telly again, he'll have to build his own receiver on the nearest hilltop and run a cable from there to his house. And since this would cost him well over £1,000, he's decided the family will just have to do without. What are you going to do with yourselves in the evenings without television?
Well, I don't really know.
Learn to play cards.
Probably, or read a lot.
You'll actually have to talk to your wife now.
Ah, that's what worries me. I'm getting a bit worried about that, because I've lost touch over the years.
There is just one consolation for losing the greatest form of entertainment in the 20th century. The Home Office say they will refund the unused portion of his TV licence fee.
The union desperately want an end to the dispute, but even if they find something... it's a bit sad, isn't it? As we faded to black for them.
Authority was switched off just before 9:30 this morning, but the equipment will be put to good use as it's being offered to the medical profession for use in the study and treatment of cancer. We have a report from Steve Evans, who visited a family in Mid-Wales who still relied on the old service. But first, Nick Partridge with the close down at St Hilary in the Vale of Glamorgan.
This is the test card that greeted the first ever viewers of ITV in Wales way back in 1958. A potential audience of about 3.25 million people in Wales and the west of England could receive a signal from St Hilary at its peak. The Mayor of Cowbridge, Councillor John Roberts, was there today to throw the switch on Channel 10 for the last time. Area engineer Eddie Howarth told me how many people he thought would be affected by today's close down.
Well, although the authority itself has not received any direct indication of the numbers, we understand there is in the region of around 27 families at the very most who may be affected, and these are mostly in the Mid-Wales region.
One of those families are the Lewises, who live in their remote farmhouse in the hills outside Merthyr Cynnog, 10 miles to the north of Brecon. While the rest of us have watched crisp colour pictures on our 625 line sets, Wyn and Dilys Lewis and their 2 young children, Bethan and Dilwyn, have had to put up with a poor black and white reception on their old 405 set. The problem is they won't be able to get a picture without doing a lot of work to get it from any nearby high ground where it could be picked up. Work which Mr. Lewis reckons would cost him £2,000.
We're roughly laying a mile of underground cable to pick up a picture. That's roughly what we have to do.
So you're talking about £2,000 just to get the television there?
Just to get an aerial, really, to pick up the signal.
What sort of picture are you used to, and what sort of services can you pick up?
Well, half a picture and one channel, 405. ITV is like looking, well, across the valley, if you like. And it's just like looking into a foggy haze, isn't it, you know?
What can anyone who finds they have lost a service do about it?
Well, we would hope that those people who are so affected would contact the IBA's regional office in Cardiff. The telephone number for that office is in the telephone directory.
What are you going to do then with the long evenings without television from the end of this week?
That we haven't thought of yet.
And diamond eternity ring only £99. Hundreds of reductions at Canterbury, Tunbridge Wells and Bluebell Hill Maidstone.
Warden Partners, the professional property people.
Keeping us company this evening are Fiona McSorley, Hugo Green and James Bromfield.
A little bit. I don't know whether you were with us yesterday, but we were talking about Orwell and the need for truth. Well, Hugo, this is one of the most dishonest women I know.
She comes from... liar.
Yeah, right. We went to the same youth group in Dover. Fiona was told at school that she would be a no-no in university, but she persevered and went to university and got a very good mark. I don't know how you feel. I mean, you should be a very truthful person. I mean, can you tell me why? What is the need for truth? I mean, why should I be honest?
The need for truth? Well, it's quite a sort of broad question, isn't it, really? Depends how you look at it. Truthful.
Well,
if we just lied to each other all the time, I think it makes life a bit complicated. You just keep remembering all the lies.
Well, maybe I'm thinking that our perception of truth comes from things like newspapers, adverts, things which you were saying yesterday are maybe not so clear and
where you can be manipulated, but actually, I mean, of course, one of the things, Fiona, that you have going for you, and thank goodness a lot of people in our society are going for them, is that you've had a good education. Now, one of the things I hope that happened along the way is that you also had your critical faculties trained and sharpened.
Never take anything for granted, always try and
to know how to ask questions, not to be taken in, but in fact to have not just your own integrity, but to be able to judge whether what you are reading or what you're hearing, what you are seeing even sometimes, whether it conforms to criteria.
You say that, Hugo, but it's not that easy, is it really? I mean, how can you tell whether... I mean, you've said yourself that we're being, fooled.
But if you take two newspapers, for example, one will say one thing and one will say the other. You pick up one, you might think, well, this is the truth.
Yeah.
And then you pick up another one and then it says totally opposite.
No,
and then, which do you believe?
You see, when I left primary school, I thought everyone told the truth. I was told, thou shalt not lie,
Yeah, they're one of the commandments. Why do we have that,
But the commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, which actually goes deeper than just telling the white lie. Sure, and the way untruth actually poisons relationships between people.
You said that just now. I mean, okay, I can say I've got into sort of shtuck before for telling untruths, maybe that came back on me, but maybe it's the trouble with my conscience. Maybe my conscience is lazy, but I mean, I can admit to you that maybe I tell white lies more than...
There's a difference, I think, between telling white lies
and
being honest in our relationships and truthful. I don't know if there is. Is there... I'm not trying to sort of say I want an excuse for telling white lies, but truth on a sort of deeper level is about relationships being truthful to people, and white lies perhaps is a...
I must tell you, I have to make to you a confession. I don't tell lies, probably for the least moral reason.
How do we know he's telling the truth?
I have a very bad memory. And I have discovered that people, generally, I suppose if you run a career as a liar, you better have a very excellent memory. I don't have a good memory, so I reckon years ago, the best thing is I tell what I know or what I see or what I believe, and
makes life very uncomplicated, doesn't it?
Well, it still complicates things, but it complicates them in a different way. But when, you look at a whole year stretching ahead, in the course of which you and I are likely to be bombarded by all kinds of information and all sorts of images come at us, how grateful I think we can be, if we can be, that you have a faculty that says, now, wait, I know history, or I know theology, I know religious history, or whatever, and I am therefore able to judge, and to make that judgment, and actually to be able to say it. I mean, Fiona, I think this is some of your training
But then
was about that.
what about a lot of people who haven't had any sort of education? Where do they stand in this? Do they have to accept everything they're told? If they haven't had sort of formal education in sort of criticism, or they've never had that sort of point of view put to them.
Well, isn't the moral, if there is a moral to our discussion here today, and I hate some moral, we must have education in a decent, civilized society. Sure, in a decent society, education has to come on top.
But so what I understand you're saying is, in effect, we should tell the truth because we demand that our teaching is honest and is sort of fair, you know.
And it keeps us...
And now the weather forecast for the TVS region. There'll be some showers in Kent and Essex, otherwise the next 24 hours will be dry. The night will be frosty as air temperatures fall to around -2 degrees centigrade, but sunny periods during the day will raise temperatures to about 4 degrees centigrade. Winds will be northerly, light overland, force 3 to 5 at sea. A reminder just before we close that 405 line transmissions from the Chillerton Down Isle of Wight transmitter cease tomorrow at 9:25 AM. This will not affect in any way our normal colour transmission service. And that then brings us to the end of our programmes until 6:15 in the morning, when the TV AM team will be saying Good Morning Britain. Then at 9:25 we'll be bringing you Thursday morning's programmes from TVS, so join us then if you can. Until then, from all of us here at TVS, this is Judy Matheson wishing you a very peaceful night. Good night. One of the BBC's 405 line transmitters. There was a special closed-down party in the transmitter room at Crystal Palace. The machinery there recalls the golden era of 405 line TV, but the old format was doomed once high-definition 625 line transmission started in 1964. Now it's estimated there are less than 700 of the old TV sets still in use. Even so, last night's end-of-transmission announcement was a particularly poignant one.
Well, it's now just about 7 minutes past midnight, and it's goodbye to 405, and it's goodbye from me.
From the IBA at Winchester, engineering announcements for the radio and television trade.
Hello again, and we're back after the break with the first engineering announcements of 1985. A very happy new year to you all.
Today, a final farewell to 405 line television, which closed down last week. New year honours for an IBA man with a head for heights, the first batch of this year's Channel 4 conversions of existing relays, and details of entirely new relays at Gethley Venderguide and Ockham Valley.
And we start today with transmission news. The first of the fourth channel installations for 1985 has already come on air, Shockley Field in the northeast of England. The channel is 32 and is for about 4,500 people. Official service is not until the 25th of January. No further conversions are due next week, but we do expect Idle, Reigate, Haddington, Monmouth and Rothbury before the end of this month. Special announcements now, and at Preseli in the southwest of Wales, S4C is likely to be off between 8 a.m. and about 12:30 today, tomorrow and Thursday. This is for aerial work but is weather dependent.
Today, interruptions can be expected at Frome, Warnersh and Cruceru. Everything should be back to normal by late afternoon.
On Guernsey, Le Touillet will be off tomorrow morning between 9:30 and 10 for electricity board maintenance.
Also tomorrow, Treharris and Blakeney will be off between 9 a.m. and about 1 p.m.
Again tomorrow, ITV from the Bake-Up relay in Lancashire is due off between 9:30 and 11:30 in the morning for work on the Channel 4 installation due to open here in early March.
In Powys, the Kerry relay is liable to interruptions tomorrow between 9:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. This is work on the electricity supply.
In Cornwall, Mevagissey is to be off between 9 and 4 this Thursday, again for work by the electricity board.
And on Friday, ITV from the Littleborough relay in Greater Manchester is due off between 9:30 and 11:30 a.m. for work on the Channel 4 installation, due in service in about mid-March.
New relays next, and at Paynton in Devon, the Ockham Valley station is due to open later this week. It's for about 700 people living along the Ockham Valley between Paynton and Preston, and also in a compact area in Shorton. Television South West and TVAM will provide the ITV service on Channel 24, with Channel 4 on 31. Group A aerials will be needed, vertically polarised. Ockham Valley is due on the air within the next few days. In Middlemorgan, the Gethley Venderguide station didn't quite make it for Christmas. It's now due later this week and is to cater for about 1,100 people in the Kilvinnis, Glencoff and New Road districts of Taff Vale. HTV Wales and TVAM are to be on Channel 59 with S4C on 65. Aerial should be Group CD, but note that horizontal polarisation will be used. Gethley Venderguide is due to begin transmissions within the next few days. It's just about a year since both halves of the transmitting aerial at Durris failed in appalling weather conditions, 1,000 feet up on a very exposed site. Temporary arrangements were made to keep transmissions going, and a replacement aerial was commissioned. After delivery to site, there followed 10 weeks of installation work and testing, much of this being carried out at the top of the mast. Happily, the task is now complete, and full power has been restored. It was the aerial fitters who saved the day, working under Jim Loney, who for many years has worked in this type of difficult situation high above the ground. For his sustained efforts, Jim has been awarded the British Empire Medal in the New Year's Honours List. Last January, he and his team undoubtedly gave us their best, above and beyond the call of duty.
To be good at this job, you'll be physically fit, mentally deficient, and we are neither.
Jim Loney there finding his sense of humour in pretty bad circumstances last January. But in the more recent past, last week saw the end of an era in television history, with the close down of the IBA and BBC networks of 405 line transmitters. One of the early stations was Emily Moor in Yorkshire, and our control room there sent us the official notification with suitable heartfelt sorrow. Such is the affection many engineers have for System A, which served us all so well. We've had many requests to show again our nostalgic look back at 405 line television,
So from me, Janet Smythe, goodbye for now, and I'll hand over to Bruce Randall.
The 405 line system was invented 50 years ago on a Sunday morning in 1934. This was in the home of the electronics genius Alan Dyer Blumlein, a member of the EMI research team led by Sir Isaac Schoenberg. The first experimental television transmissions were on John Logie Baird's 30-line system, later upgraded to 240 lines. But the rotating mechanical drums and mirrors couldn't compete with the lightweight all-electronic system developed by EMI. The BBC began regular programmes in November 1936, broadcast from Alexandra Palace, Channel 1 in VHF Band 1. The Baird system was finally abandoned some 3 months later. It was in 1954 that Parliament passed the Television Act to set up an authority. By then, VHF Band 1 was fully occupied by BBC transmissions. The ITA had to build up coverage in a new and previously unused part of the VHF broadcast spectrum, Band 3. In 1955, the BBC moved their transmitter to Crystal Palace in southeast London, and the ITA decided that their first station should be built nearby. At a site on West Norwood Hill in Croydon, the temporary station used a single laboratory prototype transmitter on Channel 9, the ERP initially 60 kilowatts from a 200-foot mast, sufficient to give good coverage over a wide area. After just 9 months of hectic preparation, regular test transmissions started on the 13th of September 1955. Programs began on the 22nd of September. 5 months later, the second ITV transmitter came on the air, Lichfield serving the Midlands. Much of the original equipment is still there, although the present mast and aerial were brought into service in 1961. At the transmitter right from the start, Bill Arnold. What were the early days like?
Well, we had quite a hectic run-up over the Christmas period. The staff were here from about the 1st of December when there was no roof on this section of the building. In fact, we started life in the pantry. And then we helped Pi put the place together, and in a short 6-week period had the transmitters in and working all ready for just the one set of transmitters for opening day.
There was quite a rush to get on the air.
There was indeed. The building had not even been started until the previous June.
Now this equipment it dates from that time, does it not? It's in remarkably good condition, but it's being made obsolete. Are you going to be sorry to see it go?
Oh, naturally. Although we have plenty of other work to do, and the maintenance load that this presents, we can well do without. It's getting very old, and an awful lot of the components now are unobtainable.
The valves and so on.
That's right.
What's going to happen to this equipment?
Well, this equipment, unfortunately, will be just carted out the door, I believe, and scrapped, because it hasn't really no use for anybody else. We have been fortunate on some of the slightly later equipment of giving it away to hospitals and the like for further use. But at this age, the equipment really is not fit for much further use.
Now, I wonder if you could tell me about some of the things that have happened at this transmitting site in the days you've been here. Problems with the weather, for example.
Luckily, we are fairly close to the A5, so the worst we have to do is walk in from the bottom of the road. But of course, that was much more critical in the days when we switched it on every morning and off at night, and had an evening shift here. These days, of course, television in general is fully automatic. But in those days, we used to have to walk in and obviously start up extra early if the weather was bad in order to switch on in time for the morning test card. I don't think we ever missed it. One Boxing Day morning, a main transformer blew up, and there was a wind that things weren't quite right, and one of the engineers actually walked 5 miles in across the fields in the snow. We've also had exciting times here, open days. We had about 4 of them in all. On the most successful, 10,000 people queued to walk through this very spot to see what we did, because there was magic in television, real magic in those days. And of course, the thing that we have in our own homes now, the videotape machine, would occupy a room of this size when we think back to those days. It's amazing how things have come on.
Do you think it's sad that television isn't quite such a novelty these days, that people aren't perhaps as fascinated as they used to be?
Naturally I do, because I still like theatre as a novelty against cinema, because of the discrete performance. I think adds to it, and the fact that we switched it on every day, we seemed to have a much greater personal interest in all that went on. Even though we had nothing to do with the programming, we felt a great affinity to those that did. And for instance, Noel Gordon came and had tea with us in the days of Tea with Noel Gordon, and that dates one because that was way back in 1956-57.
Right, stand by, everyone.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Cue grabs and take it.
Good evening. Here is the news from ITM. From Cape Canaveral, it's just been reported that following Colonel Glenn's success yesterday, another American spaceflight is to be made in the spring, and further orbits will be made every 2 months this year, and next year, a two-man space ride that will last a week. Meanwhile, Colonel Glenn's in excellent shape. This was announced today on Grand Turk Island in the Bahamas, where he was flown last night after being pulled from the Atlantic. He's spending 48 hours on the island, having medical checks and being interrogated, and then he will fly to Cape Canaveral on Friday for a hero's welcome.
Through all the lengthy preparation.
Looking at Laurie there with his etching. Are you in a low or a high mood today, Laurie?
Always high. We've got to be. Miserable stories we put out.
Lou 7, take 1. QQ.
And now for more down-to-earth matters, pay. The big railway unions today formally accepted Dr. Beeching's 3% pay offer. It will come into force on April the 1st and will mean between 5 and 8 shillings a week.
In 1969, all ITV studios switched over to 625 line production. Standards converters were installed at the transmitters, each one using more than 2,000 transistors. The 405 line network had been extended to 47 transmitters, covering 98.7% of the population. But the start of colour on UHF in 1969 signalled the eventual demise of the 405 line system. But even though UHF coverage is now up to 99.5%, what about the few who still watch 405? Brian Rhodes.
We've had very few letters. I don't think we've got 10 letters, believe it or not, at the moment, and we have been telling them that the service was going off since about the beginning of September.